It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions.
Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Tuesday, July 15th, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. So I had this day all planned out. I was ready, I was lining up everything for the daily wrap-up, which I was plenty of things to talk about today. And because I'm just somehow incapable of keeping my calendar in order, I yet again made a mistake in regard to the day I was going to have Charlie on to talk about what the hell's going on in the world. And of course, I've been looking forward to this as always because I really enjoy our back and forth. So I kind of merged them together today. So we're going to get into off the bat, like something he may think is important, what he sees going on in the world. And we're going to kind of go over some of the different things I had lined up, and then we'll just have a good conversation about it today. So as always, Charlie, I'm looking forward to it. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. Our schedules are a fluid thing, much like the gender of some of the listeners, unfortunately. So we gotta do what we got to do. I'm glad you had me on. There's so much happening here. Like these days, it feels like every day. It's like remember the movie The Jerk? There's a scene in there. Like first day felt like 8 days, and then the second day felt like that's every day it's like Groundhog Day. And,
right.
And it seems like, where we were a week ago is almost irrelevant compared to where we are today. So I'm glad we were able to coordinate and get to the bottom of things.
And by design, clearly. I mean, not literally everything. I mean, certainly possible, but the way this is kind of constructed is just, you're just getting berated. You can't possibly focus on all the different things that they're jamming in front of you. And it's just, people tend to check out. And I get it. You especially when it's almost like it's kind of flavored with like the obviousness of how it's being used to manipulate you, if that makes sense. Like, so it's like but you just go, okay, I'm not even gonna look. Like, I'm tired of being manipulated. And I think the Epstein thing is kind of a good example of that right now, which we're definitely going to get into today. But I wanted, as we did last time, and that again, to the point of that's kind of the title of the, we're going to continue to connect and talk about just what the hell's going on and the ideas like that, just trying to make sense of the chaos of the news cycle. But let's start with whatever is on your mind right now, of the last. I mean, I look back, actually, I'm surprised. We didn't, the last one we did, I think, was on, I don't think we did it last month, did we? And I've planned to do it every month. Just the same point. It's so much going on. I didn't think about it. So over the last month and a half plus, what is on your mind? What's pressing today? What do you want to get into first?
Well, I'm there's part of me that's glad that the MAGA right attach themselves so tightly to Trump and under the guise of he's going to expose the Epstein files. Mm-hmm. And then it comes out and then he doesn't. And I'm glad that that's happening. I'm glad that his base is getting a taste of what the rest of us have been witnessing for a long, long time, which is he'll say one thing and do another. Mm-hmm. So it's and that's frustrating in general, but it's especially annoying when it comes to things as important as getting to the bottom of child sexual exploitation by the people that he works with or the people who work for him in some respects. And so you could be willing to maybe excuse some of Trump's behavior and just call it politics, right? And I think maybe a segment of his base is kind of, willing to accept that it might not go exactly according to plan. But when you turn your back on exposing what's going on to children, then you lose a certain segment of the base. And I'm glad that this is happening. Welcome to the party. What took you so long? I mean, I suppose you get points for waking up to it, but this is how Donald Trump has behaved his entire life. And it's important now that, whatever gets you to the party, I'm glad you're here, but this guy can't be trusted. Oh, and here's just the most current example of why he can't be trusted. And it has to do with something extremely important. And that is the Jeffrey Epstein file. Now, I know that in our world of we weren't really sitting around waiting for a file. I never thought I was going to get an Excel spreadsheet with an itemized list of all the people that were there according to, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, these lists exist in sort of a haphazard way in books and articles and podcasts that we've been doing over the last, 10 years or so.
Mhm.
So I guess I'm happy that people are frustrated with Trump, because for so long there's been a segment that's just willing to excuse all of this. And it seems that we finally found a line in the sand for some people. And that is when you are dismissive about what's happening to children. And so I'm glad we're talking about it. There's so much more about Epstein to talk about than just this. But for what it's worth, I'm glad that this is the entry point into the conversation.
Definitely. And what's interesting is the this is why I can't help but go back to like how these people, they're committing political suicide, career suicide, like what they're doing to a massive part of their base. They just can't understand. Why would they do this? And that's why my mind goes to, well, there's plenty of things you could fill in to make that make sense. And one of them is obviously from some kind of outside influence. Maybe they're black men, but they're pressured. We can't assume any of that. But when you look at all of this, what I was getting to is why they would choose to, maybe this wasn't like by design, but this would be rolled out in the way it was when the Republicans are the ones that would be kind of stuck with it, when they're the ones that have been more than anybody, and rightly so in many ways, calling out the issue of pedophilia, the issue of the overlap with politics. And then this is, that to me is clumsy. There's no way you can think that was mapped out that way unless they're just, unless it's for some larger thing that we're not seeing yet, And so it's just interesting to point that out, that of all the people, and then that's actually why I use the picture I did today too, that it's interesting, even before all this, that with Diddy and how he owned part of Twitter. And that never really became a story, despite the fact that if it was anybody on the other side, the same thing. It's just interesting, right? And so I'm with you on this. I think that it's an important moment to see how many people are just like, and I don't think that it was that they were this entire time completely devoid of concern, that they've always been like, damn it, this is crazy. mRNA shots are bad, but Kamala was worse, right? Or whatever in their mind. Right. Now, this is the step too far. And so this is the line we're seeing for this. Okay, I can't let this be the case. This is too much for me. And it's, to what degree do you think that's happening? Because everyone's kind of, it's hard to really read it. Do you think this is like a breaking of this movement? Or do you think there's just a part of it breaking off? How do you read it?
Well, I always go back to this very bizarre television interview I saw on C-SPAN with Tom DeLay, the former House Minority Leader, I think, back in 2015, and then he did it again in 2016. And he said, I just got out of a meeting with the Justice Department talking about how they're going to normalize 12 perversions, including bestiality and pedophilia. And the interviewer was going, I'm sorry, what? You said, he said, yeah, I was in this meeting. They talk about how they're going to roll it out. Now, when you hear that in 2015, you go, oh, get out of here. Like maybe not. Right. But fast forward a decade. And now take a look back and look at what Tom DeLay was talking about, and understand that he didn't say, I had this meeting with some guy in some committee. He said the Justice Department. So when the Justice Department is in charge of normalizing 12 perversions, including pedophilia, then we've got a problem that goes beyond red team, blue team. We have a deep state that is infested with pedophiles. And of course, it's not a surprise to us. You want to control people. That's the best way to have never-ending control over them. It's one thing to catch a guy who's cheating on his wife or is a closeted homosexual, and you can get the goods on him for only so long, right, before he gets a divorce or comes out of the closet, and then that's it. But there's no expiration date on the sexual abuse of children. This is a card you can play forever. And so it's listening to Tom DeLay talk about this, and he was kind of throwing his hands up. He did it in two different occasions. I watched two different interviews with him talking about it. So it wasn't anything that he was clearly bent out of shape about this. And I think rightly so. Mm-hmm. But when you understand that, the idea that Trump's going to get to the bottom of the Epstein files, the red team is going to do it, or maybe the red team isn't going to do it. Oh, that's terrible. They're all a bunch of pedos. He's like, whoa, hang on a sec. It's both teams. Mm-hmm. And it is the common thread that runs through the control structure. and inside of politics. And you may be a bad guy they've got the goods on you, or you may be a good guy who would love to blow the whistle, but you can't, because you saw what happened to Madison Cawthorn, or you saw what happened to any host of people who've come forward and said, these parties we go to are crazy at night. And then next thing you know, you're primaried or you're thrown off a boat somewhere or whatever. So it's been a component that runs through international politics really, but America specific, since we're talking about it, this blackmail entrapment operations. And Epstein is now the retail face of it, but it's been happening for so long that it's become, in fact, normalized by these people. They get into this, and then you come out of politics, and they say, "What was that like?" And you go, "It's dirtier than you can possibly imagine," and then they leave it at that. And this is what we're talking about. You want to control somebody, you get them to vote your way, one way or another, on some bill that you're proposing. Well, the best way to do that is to make sure that you've got never-ending a set of blackmail files without an expiration date, and then you use that to just to legislate that way instead.
And clearly, there's one obvious culprit out there that is well known for its sexual blackmail and all sorts of blackmail. Yes. And it's kind of the point that I'm getting at. And we'll talk about this in a second, actually, just to start this category off. This is reminding me of when you brought it up. It's the point of Israel and the overlap of this conversation. It's not hypothetical. There, you can see many reports over the years saying that it's become a safe haven for pedophiles. You can see the reports of the IDF, where I think it was 2017, they said 1 in 6 women in the IDF are being abused. And then you jump to 2020, and it's now 1 in 3. It's like there's a very obvious problem going on. This is brand new. I just covered this. It gets very little attention. Survivors testify. Members of Knesset participated in sadistic sexual rituals involving minors. And this is large. There were members of Knesset that stood up and called this a watershed moment. They had many people testifying. It's a very big problem, and it's not just Israel, but I think it's worth noting the obvious infiltration, what we're seeing in the world today. But before we get into all that, the point with Tucker and Sagar, I think is how you say his name, right, from Breaking Points. That point that he made, which I'm glad the point's getting a lot of reach. It's always so frustrating for the people that I don't think are. It's not even relevant to bring it up every time, but just the Johnny come lately point, to where people are sort of like into this at the last moment when it's already become, and then that kind of guides into the next manipulation. I hope they're honest, Tucker included. I just question it. But the point of they're signaling to those people that we have your back, essentially, to kind of paraphrase it, right? Did you see that point?
Yeah. No, I didn't see that point, but I know what you're talking about with regard to the timing of it. It's when in retrospect, people will ask the question, were you covering this? And the answer will be, yes, I was covering it. And then the follow-up question has to be, when were you covering it? If you're Tucker Carlson and you're covering vaccines in 2025, I'm not impressed. If you're covering it in 2021, now we're talking, right? So when were we talking about the Epstein situation? When it was front page news, or in somebody who parachutes into the conversation at the last minute and wants to get into the, I know about the Epstein. Well, where were you when it was, as Sam Tripoli calls it, there's safe, dangerous, and then there's dangerous, right? Where were you when it was dangerous to talk about Jeffrey Epstein and to do all of this? And I know it's not necessarily a contest to see who is here first,
and that it's good.
I think it
see it, but if that's true.
It plays into, it takes a while to really understand the depths of this network. And if you're just figuring out about Jeffrey Epstein now, good. I'm glad. I'm glad you're at the party now and you're understanding that there are control structures set up like this. And once you understand, get a good grip on Epstein, then just expand that out and find, and realize that it's happening a variety of places. But you need to, that information needs to percolate for a while, for you to understand the connections and where this comes from and how long it's been going on and where the players really go. That's why I sort of half jokingly say, like, if you want the Epstein list, go read Whitney's One Nation Under Blackmail Volume 2. And if you do that, it's not a list per se, but it's a explanation of the organizational structure surrounding that system. And you can say, well, these people were involved, and it's not an itemized list of every single person who went to the island, but it gives you an idea of how the control structures work. Oh, and by the way, if you think the island was all that he was up to, just wait until you hear about everything else that he had been doing for 40 years too. Again, this isn't something where a guy just got busted. He went on a 5-year bender where he was pimping out children and got no. This was going on for 4 decades. He was involved in all kinds of things, and it wasn't just trafficking. It was Ponzi schemes and financial crimes and you name it. So I guess for people that are just kind of easing into the Epstein topic, like it's a perfect topic to get into because it is a spider web of rabbit holes, man. I mean, you go down one and it connects to a bunch of other things. You think you're dealing with just Israel or sexual blackmail, and then you pop up on the other side in transhumanism in New Mexico. And you go, how do these connect? You go, well, they connect because once you understand who this guy was working with in that network, then you see that there's a much bigger play here, and that the sexual blackmail entrapment, though great for headlines and definitely gets your attention and is disgusting and worthy of examination, it's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this guy.
Right. And it's also like in the context of the control mechanism, it is one of the most important points to how they control the rest of that in a lot of ways, and the cover up of the stories, right? And influencing politics in certain areas that get them what they need in those, this, and they just, again, not always the same group of person, but just the hierarchy, the powers around these things. And so the other point though, in case that was lost, other than the Tucker point, was that what he said on that interview was basically his opinion, and that Tucker, the way they responded about it was interesting. It's worth watching, but that it is Trump's administration, by doing what they're doing, are signaling to the other Epsteins, the Israel governments of the world, that we have your back, right? That everyone knows we're lying. They all know we know, right? The whole thing, it's very public. Everyone knows Tucker's call. They're all talking about it like we all know this isn't true. And it's about saying, and like that line in the sand, showing the people that we're on the side of you, not the American people or anybody else. And that we're willing to stand this line as long as you keep us in power. It's a very important thing to think about. But again, nothing new if you've been watching any of the work we're talking about how this all works. So let's look at this first part, and we'll go through some of the Epstein parts, since I do agree this is it. And again, it's not even just the individual moving part that we're seeing, like you're saying, Charlie. This is a huge story for so many other reasons than just what's in front of you. But this is so interesting, just as almost entertaining in a way, to be honest. It wasn't so alarming and terrifying that Trump has now effectively shifted this into it was a Democrat hoax and is not backing down. This is the second time he said that. And so now we'll play this clip and we can look at that and talk about it, as well as I don't know if the better word than embarrassing for the Charlie Kirks and Tim Pools out there who are trying to act like, let's move forward. And like, despite all of their statements before, it is wild. So let's watch this and we can comment on it.
No, she's given us just a very quick briefing, and in terms of the credibility of the different things that they've seen. And I would say that, these files were made up by Comey, they were made up by Obama, they were made up by the Biden information, we went through years of that with the Russia hoax, with all of the different things that we had to go through. We've gone through years of it, but she's handled it very well. And it's going to be up to her. Whatever she thinks is credible, she should release. Yeah.
Your thoughts?
You can just see the wheels turning, right? We've got this very fake thing, Russiagate, and Comey and Clapper and all the usual characters were involved in it. And we know it's fake, and it was fake, and they were doing it. Now, all we have to do is take this Epstein file and then just move it and put it on the same pile as the rest of this other stuff. See, it's all fake, just like the rest of their things. This is how the mainstream media lies to us on the daily. It's 90% truth, 10% lies, right? And then good luck to you. You get to figure out what's what and where the lies are. It's blended in. With all the other information in some sort of, I describe this in one of my books as the way that with the Smith Modernization Act of 2012, it legalized disinformation to be used, and I think of it like a peanut butter manufacturing facility, like that the EPA tells, like, you can acceptably have this amount of bugs in your peanut butter, right? It's a cricket and a half per jar, whatever the math works out to. So you have to figure out where the disinformation crickets are in your peanut butter. It's all blended in there somehow, and there's a certain allowable amount of nonsense that can go into there. And then you watch it, you turn on your TV, you think they're going to tell you the truth, and it's your job to figure out where the lies are and where the truth is. So when Trump gives that statement talking about Comey, talking about Russiagate, Russia, they did all that. That's all truth, right? That's what they were doing. But then he takes the Epstein thing and just adds it to that pile, which isn't true. And next thing you know, he's stashed it away and said, no, it's no different from the rest of this. It's time to move on. And I don't even know necessarily, Ryan, if that messaging is for you and me, because clearly it's laughable and we roll our eyes whenever we see something like that.
It's marching.
But for a segment of the population and for the social media influencers out there, the word has gone out. We're charting a course forward. We're not living in the past of Epstein. That was last week, man. We're working on other things. By the way, that's all Democrats doing that. It's not.
Despite those same people screaming for the last 2 years that he would, this was coming, it's coming, and now it's like Epstein still. It's a really weird, jarring shift.
Yeah.
Well, and
I'm glad these people that were saying for the last 2 years, he's going to release the files. He's going to release, and then the binders come out and everybody parades outside of the White House and takes their pictures with it. Good. I want you all to look as clownish as possible. You should have to own this forever. If you went out there and said, once Trump gets in office again, then he'll release the Epstein files again, then you're a sucker, and you deserve the humiliation that comes along with believing that Donald Trump is going to do what he says he's going to do, especially when what he says he's going to do is damage the empire that he is now and has always been a part of. These are his people. There's no benefit to selling them out to the general public, everybody who's on the Epstein list, when you can now instead leverage them yourself. You become Jeffrey Epstein. Magnanimous. I could have released all this information on you, Bob, and it ruined your career, and they would have put you in jail and you lost your higher level banking job. But I didn't. I kept it quiet. Now you owe me one. Right. So like, imagine that times 1,000,000. That's Donald Trump in charge, or his administration in some way controlling this, in the flow of Epstein files, and making a determination that they don't go out to the public. Oh, if you're the guy who was on tape and he just spared you, congratulations. You now work for his administration in some way, shape, or form. So it's disgusting, but I think these people that were cheerleading this and that were saying, oh, this time it's different, I think they should have to stand in humiliation and own this, because you were wrong again when you said that Donald Trump was going to come in here and save the day. He's not that type of person. He's never coming to save the day. You're just an ideological zealot, and you've been had again.
Definitely. I mean, the question is, why didn't Donald Trump release this in his first administration? Right? Are we to believe somehow he had all this in front of him and just didn't do that and then allowed them to alter it? Like, there's just, there are pieces that just don't make sense, or the idea of that, interestingly, how this has evolved with his Truth Social post he put out, which is kind of where this started. He didn't really say hoax, right? But that's what the clear implication was. What I think is interesting is how after they put the feelers out and you watch the Benny Johnsons and Alex Jones and Kurt, all them kind of rush into it, it develops in the social media field, right? And so what's interesting is now he comes back out and just goes hoax. You wonder if that was really what he was doing, or he just does his usual kind of like, here's 3 different things right down the middle. Like, how do you guys read that? Are you mad at me? How's this work? And clearly, I mean, he got ratioed on Truth Social, which is insane to me, and so he clearly goes like, whoa, okay. And then now they're circling the wagons, and those same people are just like, moving forward. But I just think it's interesting to wonder whether that was really the plan to begin with, because how can you actually argue this is a hoax? For 1,000 different reasons. And so that goes back to the original point that it's marching orders for me. Like, he is going, this is how we're going to move past this. Not that we'll win. They'll all know you're lying, but this is how we're going to stick together. We'll just call it a hoax and move forward, right? That's what, and it's interesting how the left will read this, and there's so many different moving parts to this. But let's go over the different comments on this, and then what people have said, because this is just really fascinating to me. Like, so Glenn Greenwald calls this out and says, what is in the Epstein documents that is causing Trump now to insist over and over that they're all forged and fake documents fabricated by Comey, Obama, Hillary, and Biden? This is you, which, by the way, I've noticed his account lately. It's just exploded because they're just highlighting all the Republicans getting caught lying about this stuff. But there's DeSouza saying, breaking in 2025 February, new confirmed U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi's calling for the Epstein client list to be released to the public. This is what Americans want: expose the evil. And then it says it's time to move on for Epstein. You just can't patch that up. Like, you look like a complete dishonest person, which you are. Here's Charlie Kirk. You probably saw this one. We mentioned it, right? Saying that, well, Trump told me, and so let me move on. Here's what he said.
I'm done talking about Epstein for the time being. I'm going to trust my friends in the administration. I'm going to trust my friends in the government to do what needs to be done, solve it, balls in their hands. I've said plenty this last weekend. So if you guys want to see my commentary on it, that's fine.
Trust my friends in the government. Trust. I know. At first, we joked on this morning at AM Wake Up, like, kind of like a groupie or something, like he just wants to side. My friend, they're all my friends. I know them. They were friends. It's like how it feels. But also just this idea that you're going to trust people in the power. Like, nobody takes that seriously other than sycophants and followers. It's very strange. One more thing and then comment. And this is what he said after this. Keith Woods called him out, saying, doesn't that seem like the best messaging for conservatives about Epstein? And he says, wrong. Not what I said, even though it is. Also, keep up with the news. Things are happening. So go ahead and comment. This is them going, look over there. There's your old news. This is what we're talking about. The different the auto pen bombshell. That's what they're actually pointing at. But go ahead. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the irony of Charlie Kirk deciding that he's done talking about Epstein. Were you ever talking about Epstein? Were you because I never heard anything about that. I never. 4 days.
Well,
okay, yeah. So he must be exhausted. He's ready to move on to the next thing. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and just trust my government. Is what is like the last thing that goes through people's minds as they're put up against the wall and executed by the government. This has been going on forever. The idea that people are going to just blindly trust the government is insane. But again, I actually like this.
Yeah,
I want these people to self-immolate on camera. I want this to happen because the Benny Johnsons and the Charlie Kirks of the world, they can never do. There's not enough people, but some of the people who followed them are going to go, get out of here. Like, you're done. How many people has Tim Pool lost from his audience? Half? I mean, people can't. People can't. You come out of a meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu, and then anything you tell me about that topic moving forward from that moment until the day I die, I'm not interested in, because you're stained by that. Charlie Kirk is stained by this. Hey, aren't you the guy that said it's time to move on and not worry about the Epstein files? How would you feel if your daughter was a victim of one? Well, how would you feel if your kid bought the little Sophia doll that Jeffrey Epstein and Ben Gertzel created?
Same thing,
which is rigged with
thing, right? Where Charlie and there, what if it was your kid that was hurt by the vaccine? Which is a fair point, right? Just the hypocrisy of the thing they care about versus what they care about. I always think it's interesting.
There's no anchoring in any sort of belief system, because if there was, you would be against child trafficking, whether it was the Democrats or the Republicans doing it. And if you ever turn that into a team sport, that's more of an indictment on the person than it is anything else. It's like, well, if you're willing to overlook the Epstein files simply because your guy told you to overlook it, then you have to be honest with yourself and say that you're not much of a man. You're not much of a human being at this point. You're just playing team sports and hoping that they throw you a bone if you're Charlie Kirk or Benny Johnson. Well, I enjoy whatever this is that you have now while you have it, because it's going away. Your credibility is done. It's embarrassing.
One of the deviation points too is that, remember, like the way that this kind of spun into the conversation was because of mostly Tucker's speech a turning point, right? But the reason that started is because Charlie Kirk invited him, and Megyn Kelly had that whole talk on stage. And so now Charlie Kirk is being framed by like the Loomers as the one who's, you're a traitor because you had Dave Smith and Tucker Carlson give a different opinion than we scream at everybody. But it's interesting that the argument is not that Charlie Kirk this is kind of the same point to make about Tucker and the rest. I don't think he's waking up to this. It's been there the whole time. He recognizes, like I think a lot of them do, that they'll become immediately irrelevant if they don't start talking about the obvious thing that everybody sees. So they try to edge into it, but their audience is captured and they scream at them. The question is, how many of that do you think is bots? Tim Pool, the rest of it. I mean, I really don't like, I don't want to believe that many people are that willing to ignore, the facts, or that they don't care, so what do you think? Estimation. What do you think is going on? That many bad people, dumb people, bots?
Well, there are bots. We know that. The question is how much of this is bot related. And then maybe the follow-up question is, how many human beings have you interacted with that might as well be bots? Their level of thinking is bot-like. They move in a herd. They're not very anchored in any beliefs. They're they sort of go with wherever the predominant mass is taking them. I think there are a lot of very uninformed people out there. I think there are people that rightly believe that the Democratic Party is unhinged psychopaths. And so they're thinking, well, the opposite party must be the opposite of that, which is, of course, a miscalculation. So I think that there are a lot of people that are seeing what's wrong with our world and want somebody to come and fix it, but they haven't really figured out the game, that these guys are characters, and that this is a bit scripted and not quite as organic as they'd like to believe. And that if a character does come out of the blue to save you, you should be very suspicious of that, especially if he's with the government, as Donald Trump is. So I think that there are some people that are going to be ideologically aligned with Donald Trump, no matter what he does. As he said, I could shoot somebody in the middle of the street and they'd still vote for me. So there's that segment. I think there's a segment of people that just want somebody to fix this, and they're going to get disenchanted with Donald Trump, and within the next 2 or 3 years, they'll be begging for somebody from the Democratic side to come save them, right? Because they won't figure this out. And then there'll be us. We're infuriated with both sides because we understand the game a little bit better. We started looking into the game before, some of the newer people that have come to this party, and we can see it all laid out right in front of us. We can understand the majority of the moves that are being made. I think it's an evolution for people. I think a lot of the people that are watching these right-leaning Turning Point USA things, I think a large percentage of them want things to be better, and they think that this is how it's going to be better. What they haven't understood is that in order for things to get better, you have to remove your attention from the system, not add more to of it to the system. Because if you're trying to change the system from inside, it has protection mechanisms that just don't allow that. You have to build a better mousetrap outside and then suck people off that way, which might actually wind up taking us into a conversation about Elon Musk's America First third party that he's talking about. And speaking of sort of a Pied Piper strategy to peel people away from the establishment and funnel them into a new cul-de-sac, we have this America First idea, this concept of America First, which I read a great article by Alexander Dugin today talking about that. And he was saying, this MAGA component is really always kind of was a third party, if you think about it, because the Democrats are one way and the Republicans are sort of a different version of this. But the MAGA people really are nationalists that want what's best for their country. And that really isn't represented by the red team or the blue team. And in fact, Elon Musk has a real opportunity, might not be the best one, but it's an interesting opportunity to start this third party. Of course, you and I both know it'll eventually lead into AI governance. It'll be like, oh, these human being politicians are so easily compromised with Epstein stuff and money and whatnot. We need a better form of government, maybe a government that isn't biased in that way. And let me introduce you to Grok 5, now running your local government. So I don't think of this as being a solution. Let me be clear that the Elon Musk's third party, I don't see it as a solution. I see it as a continuation of this play that we're watching, right? Is that this guy's mad at this guy, and then they fight, and then Trump and Musk are best friends, and we all saw that immediately. Like, they're gonna fight, like they're gonna break up. No way, these two hotheads they're so volatile. And then Elon leaves and says, Orange Man is bad after all. Well, let me do this. I'll start this third party, and it definitely won't be controlled by Peter Thiel and all those guys, right? Wink, wink. But we'll make it more. It'll be fair, and it'll be this. And he does have money, and he does have a long track record of getting things done. But I do find it interesting that the guy who has made a living off of government contracts is going to introduce the third party to the government and then bring down the government that he himself is dependent on. So I'm always a bit, I'm always keeping that in the back of my mind, that Elon is the biggest government contractor in the world right now. So I don't know.
Well, let's talk about the third party point a little more. Let's go through the rest of these Epstein points. And I want to talk about the third party point before we overlap it with where I think it's really about. Like, I'm very skeptical, as I think we all should be, with anything even politically related, especially the third party shoe that we wait for to drop for a long time, the ploy, knowing we want that kind of thing. But I think, I get the sense, I'll jump ahead briefly, that it's, even Doge. I was thinking about this today. What I think we really saw there was that Elon, AI is what they're all about right now. Like, that is a huge, one of the major elements of everything that's happening. And I think they clearly needed all the information, like the unfettered access, both Israel, Palantir, Elon Musk, everything they're doing, they were given open, unfettered access to everything about you out there watching everything in this country, right? And so now he got what he wanted. So he doesn't need this anymore, right? He dropped this. I'm out of here, moves over here. Let's pretend we broke up, or maybe it's real. I don't think they like each other. And now we're starting this. And, Texas, Star City, whatever it's called, the AXAI, I mean, it's all kind of exploding. And, we're still over here digging through, look at 2020, AutoPen, Doge, we're like distracted while this whole thing is building around us. So let's come back to that. Let me just rattle these off really quickly so we can see the rest of these. It's funny. DC Drano. This is Trump going, I've always suspected Adam Schiff was a scam artist. But yeah, they're all liars. But this is now a whole new scandal. Look over here at the Democrat cheating. Whoa, President Trump just called out Adam Schiff. He's a felon. These are them going, whoa, like, in my opinion, stop talking about what we're all doing. Schiff for prison. See, here's Tim Pool. No one's above the law. Can you imagine saying that right now? What's going on? It's just wild. Here's Tim Pool.
Talk about a Barnum statement.
Seriously.
Holy moly.
Tim says, this is what I find most hilarious. It's almost like he's trying to play. This is what they do. Like, I'm kind of trolling, but this is what they're actually pushing, right? He says, absolutely insane that Democrats actually voted to have the U.S. government publish child porn. Now, that even Grok will tell you that's not what they're saying. They're talking about them. We want the Epstein files. And now the Republicans are going, we can't do that. That's child porn stuff. And so there's Tim Pool outraged about releasing the Epstein files. And that's how he's trying to frame that. And here's what's funny. This is you. Tim Pool, February. Pam Bondi said the Epstein list is on her desk, release the list, expose the criminals. And now I can't believe they voted to do that.
Right.
Did you want to comment that real quick, since that's just absurdly funny?
This idea that the list is going to be full unredacted videos of all these people involved in child pornography, nobody is asking for that. And as far as I know, nobody was expecting that or pushing for it. We just wanted to know who all the people were that are on the videos, not that we need to see the videos themselves. So this idea like, oh, we can't release that. That'd be illegal for us to release it. Like, we're not asking you to do it. Strip all the names of the people, that you're watching in these videos. Give us those names, right? Or, have a trusted partner who's, go in there and, watch it himself and make the list. But this idea that they were going to like release all of this information, it's like, no, that is not in any way, shape, or form what the American people were waiting for. We weren't waiting for child porn to be shown to us on video. It's not about that. But of course they conflate the two things, and what these mainstream alternative media people are doing is it's embarrassing, frankly, but it's not surprising to try and control the narrative and to move on. And hey, listen, we've got Adam Schiff right where we want him. Didn't we have this conversation in 2016 and 2017, 2018, 2019? Like, this isn't new. Adam Schiff's been a bad guy forever. This isn't some sort of breaking headline or anything like this. I just don't. It's just a distraction. And I think they understand how the mainstream media news cycle works, that you've got 48, 72 hours. You just have to wait it out. I don't know. The cycle's probably less on social media because everything is amplified. But they'll just write it out. Next week or next month there'll be a new thing, and then we'll be on to the next topic, right? And Epstein will be sort of forgotten in trash, and some group, segment of the population will say, oh yeah, they'll live the rest of their lives thinking, yeah, that was some Democratic hoax that they put. Yeah, that was, and they'll never have the intellectual curiosity to dig into it and find out if they were lied to. And frankly, it's never going to matter for them or for their lives. They're just going to live their lives believing nonsense, which is fine. But for us, it's important that we get it right and that we hammer on people like Tim Pool and Charlie Kirks of the world that are trying to, if you're trying to clean up the mess of the Republican Party, who's deeply involved in child pornography, then you are a bad guy too. You're not allowed to be anywhere near it and helping out. It's weird to me that the Republicans didn't say, hey, look, I want the list too, but this is unacceptable, right? There's been no breaking away from that. It's everybody is in unison on this. There's no outliers.
The Republicans, I think, now this is off the top what I saw circulating today, so keep that in mind. But the headlines circulating were that the Republicans were essentially the ones that blocked this, right? Which is obvious when you think about it. But I just don't know who and how, in what ways, and the different breakdowns. But what's crazy about this is just that it's obviously not. You can read it for yourself out there. They were not going, we want the child porn released, right? They're saying release the list. So he's just, in a very dishonest way, framing that as that's what they wanted. Why? Because he knows that the intellectual lightweights out there are going to go, oh, the Democrats are pedophiles. So it all lines up. Just ignore the obvious thing that they just turned into they just shifted direction. It's just really embarrassing. But there must be something driving that. Here's Eagle Guntherman. It's sickening the lengths Democrats will go to protect pedophiles. Here he is 8 hours ago. FYI, the Rules House Committee just votes 7-5 to block an amendment pushing for full vote on the releasing the Epstein files. And the point is they're all in line with where this is going. Here's 5 times August. Charlie Kirk says Fauci was pardoned in the dead of night by AutoPen. The same Fauci that Trump gave a medal to, but we don't care about that. The use of AutoPen was approved by White House aides, which again, nobody has proven or verified that this is anything other than Biden using an AutoPen. I wouldn't surprise me if somebody else was using it for him, but the insinuation or the assumption is that somebody else did because he was out of his mind, which is true. But they don't have that proof. It'll never, in the court dynamic will never come. They're just using this to distract, is my opinion. The AutoPen point. And 5 times August says, if you think our government is going to do something about Fauci's crimes after telling you to forget about Epstein, I've got a bridge to sell you. Here's Alex Jones saying, I can't believe what Trump world is doing to itself. This guy's the worst of it all. He's just very clearly trying to ride this wave as if he's the one, like he's independent of it all. It's just so crazy. And this is something I thought you'd think is interesting. We can talk about this in the last part. Jeffrey Epstein's accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell, is now claiming she's ready to reveal the truth, whatever that really means, about the list. And what's interesting is that I was reading through this yesterday, that what they're now arguing, Trump claiming it's a hoax, suddenly adds new light to her case, doesn't it? Because now she's going, her lawyers are going, well, if there's no list, if it's a hoax, you can't charge her with trafficking because there was no clients. And so she's going, perfect, we're going to come back to this court unless Trump does, works with that's kind of what's happening right now. And so they're trying to block her from being able to go back to court. I bet you they're working behind the scenes. Go ahead and comment. This is just really interesting development. If you want to.
I'd be very careful if the cameras in my cell turned off if I were her. You know what I mean?
Right.
She's a cog in a much bigger machine. This is something that we've been discussing for years, this network. And as they said, Jeffrey Epstein didn't traffic children to nobody. Right. There had to have been a client. Well, it's what are we talking here? Are we talking about videos? Are we talking about how many people, who was on the airplane, who was showing up for fun with physics at the island? I mean, just because you were there doesn't necessarily mean that the worst potential, the worst possible situation happened. I mean, I read into some of the events that were going on there with regard to the scientists and the scientific component of what was happening on Jeffrey Epstein's island was definitely bizarre. And his interest in physics was a huge curveball that I think a lot of people that dug into this didn't really understand. I mean, they could get the child trafficking and the Ponzi schemes, but how does physics work into this whole thing? But you know, the role of the Maxwell family. Well,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
like I've got a stack of documents on them. It's and by the way, it's not limited to Ghislaine, right? There's other sisters, Isabel and Christine, and they were up to no good as well. So this I can see it now. I can see this now. By the time the mainstream media gets done with their makeover campaign, we're going to have Ghislaine Maxwell as the victim in all of this, where she was just under the thumb of Epstein. She was put in prison by the dirty deep state that wanted to keep her silent about a list that didn't exist. And now we've got to free her because she's being held there. She's a damsel in distress who didn't have anything to do with it, was just along for the ride, you know, maybe based on her childhood with Robert Maxwell, didn't have the greatest of influences and found herself, no. She's a dirty operator as well. And this whole situation was very real, but I can almost see the media trying to, and then the social media influencers as well, trying to whitewash her reputation and bring her back as some sort of victim in this whole thing. And to come out and she's going to, give us the list, and she's going to make sure that the deep state is held accountable, and blah, 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 and it'll go on. And then you'll never hear it again.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, and maybe that's all because she now has some leverage because they're seemingly incompetent, didn't think through the statements in front of the media. You know, like there's a lot of moving parts. Here's Jack Posobiec, and this is today, this is where it's now turning. And now what's funny is there was all these floated claims that Bongino and Cash had already stepped down, and that seemed to be a bunch of grifters online who were misunderstanding an Atlantic parody that went out, or like a satire. But either way, they seem to still be there. And even Bondi, and Trump's clearly backed her, but it says Trump says Bondi should release the files. So this is an interesting kind of, he's still backing her, right? But you can tell this is what he does with Rubio too. He's kind of like, it's up to them. It's their fault. It's their responsibility, which is just insane. Here is Dershowitz coming out now at the same time and saying judges are suppressing the information. So, it's like these things don't add up together. I just think that this as always has the hallmarks of what I've become accustomed to in Israeli propaganda. A lie over here, a lie over there. Here's three at the same time. Which one do you like? Right? Keep throwing out adaptations of the lie until you finally just ignore it or keep it. That's what we keep seeing in all of this. Here is, this is from today. Man who served time in same cell as Epstein says there's no way he was able to kill himself, which again, we already know all of this. We've already parsed through all this. We've broken these things down. That's why we know largely that they're lying. Here's Guntherman. And this is to kind of, push into the direction. President Trump said the auto pen scandal is, quote, the biggest scandals we've had in 50 to 100 years. That feels like obvious. Don't look here. Lastly, the same point I just said, the only people now pushing this are blind followers and opportunists. Remember who they are. Also be skeptical of those who suddenly see the light when it's been obvious for a long time. Hope they changed, but question it until they prove out over a very long period of time. Now, he says many of them will support Palantir Vance in 2028 and still believe voting is the solution, kind of what we were saying, right? This is his opinion. They'll claim Vance learned from his lessons from Trump and moved on. Just as a thought to carry it off this, that it's easy to see how this perpetuates as long as they just give you something that seems to make sense, and people will jump on it. So it's just very, very alarming where this all goes. Any last thoughts on Epstein before we talk about the overlap to this, the AI point that I thought was interesting?
No, let's jump into AI. Let's do it.
Okay. How much time do you have today, by the way?
As much as you need.
Awesome. Yeah, we will probably go that much longer, but just because since there's a lot to get into, let's talk about this. This is just to start it off. This is Thomas Massey pointed this out, and oops, wrong one. He said they blocked consideration of my amendments to the Clarity Act, which would have prohibited central bank digital currencies as well. And this is Marjorie Taylor Greene pointing out the Genius Act, saying the House has voted on this, which lays the groundwork for CBDCs. And so the point is that there's clearly effort right now to allow this groundwork through multiple either bills or stopping ones trying to prevent it, to allow the direction of sort of this CBDC stablecoin aspect. I just included that today, but it's definitely in the same wheelhouse as the AI conversation. It's all these moving parts to the building technocracy. And I thought this is interesting is that Elon Musk has this place in Texas. And this all relates to the AI water point, which we'll stop on and talk about, that Elon Musk has built this, everyone should watch this actually. It's really interesting. This is a video about the town, and I believe it's Minnesota. And what we're talking about is how Elon Musk has created this massive sprawling thing And with no really oversight, he rushed this through. Nobody knew what was happening. And now it seems as if they're not only, as the title says, we went to the town Elon Musk is poisoning. And you can see that not only is it what's happening around it, and same thing we'll talk about when it comes to these other locations. This is, I believe, Texas as well. Their water tap ran dry when Meta built next door. The point is that they are using these turbines to massively increase this energy, which is causing all sorts of really terrible side effects. And, and to me, it all comes back to the same point, that there's an end game here. They're rushing through to get this done at the same time when they're flirting with no AI regulation, all these different parts. Like, this is what's going on right now, guys. And it's like, it doesn't just involve one group. I think it involves all the people we're talking about. So I think it's really alarming when you realize that this just overlapped with the weather manipulation. I don't know if you looked into the Rainmaker guy who Alex just got on. He's kind of like this another Palantir, Lucky Palmer lookalike type.
Palmer mullet guy.
Yeah. And so he runs Rainmaker, and he admitted more than once, I even showed his interview with Sean Ryan, where he said on July 2nd, they had cloud seeded. They do it in Texas. They do it in Tennessee. They do it all over the place, which is real. They admit to it, but he claims it has no effect on what happened. I just went through that to think it was interesting, and then stumbled into the larger conversation, which is weather manipulation for artificial intelligence, or rather, possibly creating more rainfall, because it becomes very obvious that this is a major problem. Like sustainability, like the idea that it's impossible that this will be sustainable unless we rapidly increase the amount of fresh water that we have. And so just to read this, and then we'll talk about it. My point on this was just whether or not that's happening, increasing rainfall, because we seem to have record rainfall and floods happening all over the country right now. A megawatt is equal to 1 million watts. This is the article describing the amount of the energy in general. Watt is the rate at which energy is used and produced. For example, a 100-watt light bulb uses 100 watt hours, whereas 1 megawatt could light two 60-watt light bulbs nonstop for a year, or run two fridges for a whole year. In 2021, the United States used 11,595 gallons of water per megawatt hour for cooling just power plants, according to U.S. Energy Information. Now, Sam Altman, co-founder and CEO of OpenAI, claimed in a recent blog post, which they dispute in this article, they say without providing evidence, that each chat GPT, same point for Grok, by the way, if not even worse based on some other factors. The evidence, they provide the evidence that each chat GPT prompt a person enters uses 0.34 megawatts, or what he describes as, quote, roughly 1/15 a teaspoon of water. And this is pretty much roundly disputed by people that have been doing this research. Studies were in this links right here to this study from 2023. Different results. A 2023 study conducted by University of California that basically found that ChatGPT, to write one 100-word email, consumes 17 ounces of water. One email. But taking the information from this other study and saying they used 11,595 gallons per megawatt hour for a power plant, and knowing that's happening more, somewhere in there, even if it's 0.35 or roughly 1/5 of a teaspoon in regard to how much they're using, that still presents an interesting problem. But the amount of water, and again, the larger point, if you look into this is coming out left and right, is that the amount of water they're consuming to do one thing is like gallons, if not somewhere within that range, just to go, hey, Grok, answer this question for me. And so that in general becomes insane to me. And the other resources we're talking about, like the quartz stand from, Spruce Pines, different things, they're like overtaking small towns for what they're using. I just think this is a setup to fail, if not just to create another scarcity resource that we'll be controlled by. I know I'm a conspiracy theorist, right? But what are your thoughts on that?
That's where my mind goes with this. No, we all understand the energy usages of AI. We hear Meta talking about firing up 3 Mile Island again, and like let's have some nuclear energy facilities to produce, to power these AI data centers. I think we understand that. The water side of things is a little trickier, because I don't think that most people associate those two things together. What do we need water for? What are we spraying it down with a hose, or what's happening? And so my mind immediately goes to, it uses this new thing that we've created, uses a disproportionate amount of water, which is, a tangible resource that you could measure, and, another one of those measurables like carbon dioxide and whatnot, that eventually will become scarce, regulated, controlled by Nestle Corporation, who's obviously talked about it at Bilderberg, Bush family owning that massive freshwater ranch in South America. And there's going to be water wars. I mean, we haven't got to that part of the play yet, of course, but we will eventually get there. And I can envision a scenario in which the United States has a variety of problems happening simultaneously with regard to AI. First, we have a power generation gap because somebody in California decided that they were going to reimagine the whole power grid there and never upgrade it, over 50 years and try to run electric cars and all those things and destroy that. So we definitely need power generation, but where are we going to get that? Are we going to keep burning coal, or are we going to do the nuclear thing? And then on top of that, okay, so we don't just have a power generation. Now we have a water problem too. So, and in California, as somebody who lived in California for over 30 years, there's always,
right,
freshwater lakes, oceans running down the whole left side of your state, but no water available. And we've always had a water issue. In fact, had to buy it from the Rockies and have it sent in on a 100-year lease. And so there's always been big problems with the water system in California. And this would exacerbate it. I mean, the last thing in the world we need is something like AI power generation systems using water in the same way that fracking is using water, which is just use it as a lubricant, and then it gets completely contaminated and poisonous, and then you can't use it ever again after that. So we have to think these things through. But of course, I believe they've thought them through, and that maybe the scarcity component to this is a feature, not a bug.
That's where my mind goes with it as well. At least what we've seen of them in the past. But important to kind of explain that for those that may not know or haven't seen my coverage on it. The basic point, as you were highlighting, is that it's both for like generation, like using the water to power, which is the smaller part of it. But I guess the largest part is the kind of the cooling aspect. And what's weird about it, and this is also important to hear, it has to be fresh water, which is like the entire problem with that, and that they use this to cool this down and it evaporates. Like it uses a lot of water. And so it is a really crazy kind of development in all of this. And I think, it's clear that this is, whether or not it's by design, they don't care. I think that's always the case. Is it's not about what we want, or they'll deal with our, my point was look at Flint, for example. Maybe this has been going on a lot longer than we think. And we've been watching these moves take place, and they're like, we don't care if you get hurt by it. Yeah, we'll deal with the stuff that fall out, but there's a much bigger play happening here. It really does concern me where this goes. And here is, again, the other article from let me make sure it was what place it was. Oh, it's Newton County, Georgia. So it's happening all over the country. And this is, I was playing a video about this, actually. Their water taps are running dry. There's all this contamination. This is happening pretty much around the country right now. Here's an interesting discussion from Texas. And I plan on doing a lot more deep dive on this, but I was going through this today. So in Texas, there's two things to think about, actually. We saw the AI point, right? And technically still that could come back into play, despite them already removing it from the bill. Arguably, it can still find its way back in. I don't think it has officially happened yet, but the idea is they removed the 10-year moratorium, right? Is that it really just jumps back to states. It's kind of the ultimate point, right? So, which is what I would have wanted, states' rights, it matters. But so that ultimately means then in Texas, for example, if we're talking about Elon Musk in Texas, then they now have the ability to try to regulate that. And I imagine he's much more immersed in this. So when the AI side of it is one thing, just whether or not they're going to regulate that. But I do think these overlap. It's in the same conversation. But in the water side of it, I found some interesting water legislation. This is from 2025. It's from May. Here's what it says. Relating to creating the Central Texas Water Alliance, which I'll be looking more into, providing authority to issue bonds, granting the power of eminent domain, providing authority to impose fees. Yeah, that doesn't sound like it's related at all, right? I mean, that's just like exactly what I'd worry about. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a big problem. The eminent domain. See, it's one thing if you own your land. You may own your land, depending on where you live. And as somebody, I spent 25 years in real estate, but you can own your land and there could be water under your land. But if you don't also own the water rights, then you don't own it. And so that can be a situation where it's not just that Bill Gates is buying up farmland. He's also buying aquifers. He's buying the underground water, places, pieces of land that have not just water, but water rights to it. And you do it legally in that if you do it through the system that they created, where you have to have rights to the water in your ground, which sounds crazy to anybody who's a free sovereign person, that the state needs to get involved, or fining you for collecting rainwater on your property like they do in Oregon.
I was going to write that down when you're done. Like San Francisco is the same thing. How you could be charged for a crime for collecting rainwater. Israel says Gaza can't do it because they own the water. There's a lot of overlaps to this.
Yeah. So we just take all of our negative thoughts that we have about how they do this stuff, and then just say, that precious, clean, amazing, life-giving water, they'll do it to that as well, because they're on that's the next step in this. Yeah, they want to control the oil, you control the transportation, control the food, you control the people, like Kissinger says, control the water and you control life and death. And that is unfortunately the direction that they want to take us. And by the way, in a world in which the robots are running things and AI is managing all of these systems, human beings aren't going to be as necessary as they currently are. And therefore, what do they need all this water for, Ryan? That's just and useless drinkers.
Yeah, you're right. And it makes you very expendable, much more than you are now. Imagine that, right? I mean, if they don't care about you now, imagine they no longer need your labor, right? I mean, this stuff, right. Stuff like this sounds so crazy to some people. It's all about history, guys. Look. Right, this is not new. Like the power structures, the dying empires. There's all sorts of things like we have been here before in history. It's important to understand how these things work, and it's not new. And here's another alarming part that overlaps what we were saying before: is AI, rather the direction of AI for this country, has now completely immersed itself with Israel. Israel signed an agreement with the U.S. to cooperate in all things artificial intelligence. And so, as they were saying, don't forget, they just signed a policy to consolidate all of the data on all Americans, and now Israel will have access to that. No problem there, there's so many moving parts to where this goes. The Pentagon's now going to claim, they're saying they're going to start using XAI, which is just that DARPA program that became Elon's toy, that now became a social engineering tool, which is involved with the AI direction, which now Israel is immersed with. I mean, Israel is completely immersed in Twitter, and now XAI is Twitter, and now the Department of Defense is going to be. These things are not made up, guys. And everyone watching the show knows we've talked about all these. We have the receipts. This is an overtaking of our country. Not to so jarringly switch topics, but my God, I'm just so alarmed with how clear all of this is.
Yeah. And the X app, the everything app on your phone, that's social media and eventually will be your money. Just know whose group is partnered with Israel on all of this stuff. I mean, if you think if you think, oh, I don't want WeChat, it'll be like Chinese dystopia. I want the American version of it. Well, the American version of it comes with Israeli fingerprints all over it as well. So whatever you think you're getting away from with the Chinese group, you're walking right into. If it's American, it might as well just have an Israeli flag wrapped around it. And so all of your data, pick your poison. Who do you want to know the intimate details of your life, the Chinese or the Israelis? Because somebody's going to know it, because that's the way this is set up to move forward. I personally am not interested in either one of those groups being involved in this, but my opinion really apparently doesn't matter any longer. The opinion of the American people doesn't matter. If it did, Donald Trump would have been having meetings saying, we got a real PR nightmare on our hand with this Epstein stuff. We got to figure out the right thing to say. They come right out and say, it's all fake. It doesn't exist. Yeah. That's not the right thing to say. That wasn't workshopped through all, Hill and Knowlton to come out and tell you this is exactly the best thing to say. So I'll tell you what, Ryan, what makes me the most nervous about this is that it seems that there used to be, administrations worried about the perception management component of this. Like, how's the general public going to feel if we do X, Y, and Z? We're going to do it anyway, but how are they going to feel? And how can we manipulate this? And with the Trump administration, it's like they just don't even care. It's like they don't care about the optics of it. We're going to do it anyway. It's going to be bad from a PR standpoint, Mr. President. You're going to have to deal with this. They don't care. It's like, or either that, either they don't care or they're not sophisticated enough to think a couple steps ahead and realize what this is going to have, the ramifications, like you said, of Ghislaine Maxwell's case. Now looks at, her lawyers are going, oh, no clients, you say, let's get the judge back in chambers. Let's have a conversation, because apparently we've got somebody who's been locked up for a crime that didn't happen. So this is, I don't know if it's better to be ruled by sophisticated psychopaths or this bumbling group of morons inside the Trump administration that can't get the messaging right. It's all bad either way, I suppose. But hey, but at least it's not Kamala.
Right. Or you could add, or they're not in control. It's hard not to, I was saying earlier is that, there are people that can't get past that point that, I don't understand why they're doing this. This is hurting their career. And they just can't move beyond, which is like basically a hang up to where there must be an excuse. I'm not going to look further until that makes them think maybe Democrats are tricking me. It's like they can't get past. Maybe it's just that they're not the ones making these decisions. Maybe it's that they're not acting for your interests. That's my opinion, but they can't prove that. But consider those possibilities, because I don't think there's anything that makes more sense there. Not that I know for sure, but if you look at what's happening, and like we keep saying, why would he come out and do that? Why would he, knowing that his base, this was built on the idea that this was going to happen, and doesn't come out and just go, oh, well, here's why it's not going to happen. Comes out and goes, it's fake. And anyone says otherwise, you're dumb. Why are we still talking about Epstein? It's like, that's a like a come to Jesus moment. People are like, okay, this is terrifying. Somebody else is controlling this, or he's not our person. And so I still go back to, that's because there's other things that are truly dictating this policy. And it's not just Trump or this administration. It's been going on a long time. I think it juxtaposes or, kind of intertwines with the outcome, the technocratic, the Build Back Better, all the things that are happening while they're pointing back at 2020. I think that's where it kind of comes together right now. And so, go ahead.
And we talked about this a couple months ago, the invisible influence, the black hole that is exerting its forces on people and making them behave in an unusual manner. And you just go, well, an explanation would be that an external force that is in the shadows is making this person dance, because they sure are dancing, and they never danced before, and now they're enthusiastically dancing like their life depends on it. So I wonder why that is. The answer is, well, because somebody has the answer is that there's somebody above them. That's it. Who it is and what, there's if you think that you've reached the final boss, you haven't. This is there are layers above these people. Obviously we know that, but for people that are scratching their heads going, why is he operating against his own self-interest? Because he's controlled. And this is the part in the movie where he gets controlled and he has to do things that are incompatible with reality, completely goes against his when he was running for president, the sales pitch he was giving, how he's going to open the Epstein files, and simultaneously, boy, it's neutered a whole bunch of mainstream alternative media people, which is great. They've been stained by this, which they should be. And I think that in the aftermath of the Epstein debacle, he'll do what he always does too, right? He'll fire Pam Bondi or Kash Patel or Bongino or all three of them and say they were the problem. I was trying to give it to you, but these guys were the bad guys. Yeah. So expect more frustration, I would assume.
Yeah, I agree. And it's worth pointing out again, like, in case this was missed when we talked about it briefly a moment ago, right? So if we're being told, so Trump up until now, right before 2024, I'm going to release the files, right? He had said this, that's why it became a thing. So think about the timing. If Trump was saying that in 2024, so he was the president before that. So that means that he knew what was there to some degree and was telling you, I'm going to release them. So now to jump to it's fake, like there's just not somebody stupid enough to fall for that. You're either on the team and you're willing to lie about it, or you're, think about that just doesn't work together. If he was telling you he was going to release the thing and now says it's fake, then that means he lied in 2024 maybe, or he lied before. He's lying at some point. It's like, that's the really hard thing for most people to get past. Let me play this clip about the AI connection to what we were just going through, which I do think is a really alarming kind of glimpse into this, because even the Epstein thing, by the way, and then let's actually touch on some of the things that you thought added to the technological part with Epstein. But the future rather the immediate reality that they're building around us. It's not the only story. Clearly, there's a lot of things. The genocide in Gaza is happening, and we have to keep talking about it. But I just don't want people to miss that this is, I think, that's their long bet. This is where this is going. And so if we're getting pulled into these old stories, which are probably still relevant too, you can decide for yourself. But make sure you're not ignoring this larger story and where it goes, because this is where I think we're driving. And I think we all know that.
In the long term, the plan is to pretty much lock up humanity in smart cities, which is kind of a superset of a 15-minute city. They've sold all the state and local governments and countries that smart cities are about sustainability and the good of the city. But in reality, the language from the UN and WEF and their white papers is all inverted. So, air monitoring is really about limiting mobility and no car ownership. Right? Surveillance, control via LED grid is why the smart lighting is there. Water management is about water rationing, noise pollution is about speed surveillance, traffic monitoring is about limiting mobility, and then, of course, energy conservation is all about rationing heat, electricity, and gasoline. Another concept one should be familiar with is called geofencing, and think of it as an invisible fence around you where you cannot go beyond a certain point, and that will be related to your face recognition, digital identity, and access control. Your smart contracts, SoftBrick can turn off your digital currency beyond a certain point from your house. Our world has been turned into a digital panopticon. That means you can be monitored, analyzed, managed, and monetized.
Man, oh man. And I know some people still think this is just an impossibility. I think this is the point that we're trying to make today, in amongst others, is this is happening regardless of which color you vote for. Like, this is rolling out either way rapidly, as that's the distractionary point. And I'll include this article from Derek that I think overlaps with the exact point. And let's not forget that I think it was Space Force and SpaceX just entered into a deal with this low Earth orbit new mesh thing they're doing. Israel just used a SpaceX rocket to launch their own, which I think is all part of the same. They're low Earth orbit dynamic. This is more spying, more surveillance, more control. And the same thing I just highlighted, also geofencing. Fantastic. And here is what Derek was talking about, way ahead of this story, by the way, 2024, about the NRO, which is this NRO is involved with that same thing. It is the same thing. I just want to show you this. Again, thinking about what they just showed you and how they need the satellite. Well, this again is SpaceX and the Starlink, rather the satellites, just from 2019. Just do it really rapidly, all the way to basically right now to 2024. I mean, that terrifies me just in and of itself. Like, makes me suffocate. It feels suffocated with, the reality that there's that many, that's the world that's being built around us. That's what I'm trying to highlight. So go ahead and comment on that if you'd like. And then let's talk about some of those overlaps with Epstein and the deeper technocratic stuff.
Well, the digital prison is one of these topics that will get you heavily banned. I had Ilana Freeland on. We started talking about the space fence on one of my episodes. And this was a couple years ago, and I put it up on YouTube because I had a YouTube channel back then. 4 hours. It only took them 4 hours before the video was, I got a strike. It was thrown off. I mean, it was kicked off, and it's like, boy, space fence. I mean, of all the things we could be talking about, I get it that YouTube is sensitive. I always find it interesting to figure out where their pressure points are. And the space fence was one that, and I talked to someone else. I said, I had a lot of Freeland on. We were talking about this. And she said, oh, I could have told you, don't have her on. They'll get you immediately. I'm like, wow, I'll talk to her. I want to talk to her again. I'm just curious as to why so if you're talking about those topics, it can be inconvenient for them. And I, and it's not just, oh boy. Well, it's the science and the blending of science and technology. We've always had this evolution, right? As humans, we're trying to get better and better and better, and hoping that the science and the technology gets better. And if it's in the hands of the common people, fine, great. But my fear is this evolution of technology and whose hands it's in, who's financing it, and who ultimately controls it. And this takes you into I think we learned during COVID, it's just as easy to buy a scientist as it is a politician, right? What we saw with Fauci or anybody connected to the FDA or CDC, you can. So scientists are for sale. And Jeffrey Epstein bought one. A guy named Martin Nowak, doctorate in biochemistry and mathematics from the University of Vienna. He's on record saying, Epstein has changed my life. Because of him, I feel I can do anything. And Epstein floated this guy $30 million at Harvard, then visited him 40 times. And they go, well, what was he working on? Well, he wrote a book on natural selection of cooperation and a desire for working on evolutionary game theory, population dynamics, and things like that. He became, in 2003, he became a professor of mathematics and biology at Harvard, and then became the director of this, what's known as the Program for Evolutionary Dynamics. And this was funded by Epstein. And so you go, yeah, I get it. He runs blackmail and entrapment operations to catch politicians. What is he doing with evolutionary game theory?
Yeah.
Why? And why is he so focused on whether or not, exploring the equations of life? In Martin Nowak's book in 2006, he writes about evolution with regard to infinite populations and how AIDS and infectious viruses can play a role and impact populations. Oh, really? You don't say. So you're interested in how viruses play roles in population structure, and how when you insert variables, what that does to the overall population. And Jeffrey Epstein is financing. It'd be one thing if like some altruistic scientific group was like, I'm interested in learning more about this. It might be something fascinating to get to the bottom of and really see what happens here. We do this and people do that. But when it's Jeffrey Epstein financing this, you have to go, what is this really about?
Yep.
This is about eugenics. This is about depopulation. This is about a much heavier thing. So that's why I'm saying, like, if the sexual blackmail entrapment brought you to the party, brace yourself, because it gets so much weirder than this when it comes to this guy. And don't even get me started on the, on all the little Sophia robot that he was building with Ben Goertzel. I mean, this is the dystopian hellscape.
Right. Well, I mean, and the thing that comes to my mind is whether or not, so Epstein was part of something larger. Like it's very clear, and not just the intelligence aspect. There's something a bigger, and again, also just one part of that network, right? Not, that's the important thing to think about. But the money aspect of it was probably just, I mean, you could think of it like he is a vessel to do all of these things, right? So you wonder whether there was money passing through him, which is easy to do in the financial world with the way that they operate, that just ended up in the hands of people that needed it. And he was just the middleman in a way. However you look at it, the point is that they're all involved in these. If you look at the body of work and the direction it's going in, they want to control life. I mean, that's what it really comes down to. And I always point out Charles Lieber, which there are connections that you could make, but it's, the point is, it's more important to highlight, what Epstein was doing and, the connections they're in. But Charles Lieber was at Harvard. And so I think it's important to think about the idea of the was it the virus-sized robot dynamic he was working on? He was the lead in nanotechnology, and right before the COVID dynamic, there's all these different moving parts, and maybe they don't even overlapped or aware of that. But the point is that these are all pieces to where I think this control structure is going, and the eugenics part of it is terrifying to me, because clearly they have an opinion who is, it's a supremacist perspective. That's what eugenics is. And so these people are guiding a lot of our policy. And I'm talking about in particular, like the US government, which the overlap before was where even the Nazis brought that up to. Israel is very much in the same mindset. So it just concerns me where this goes and how they see that as they're making situations that make our resources finite,
Yeah. And if we want to make just a direct connection between these guys, we've got Epstein's partner, Ben Goertzel, who was the head of, he's from Open Cog Foundation, and he was the guy they were building the little Sophia robot with. This is a robot that is not the Sophia robot that we saw in Saudi Arabia, that 6 foot tall robot. This is a small 18-inch plush doll that's loaded with cameras in the eyes and microphones and geotagged and all that stuff. And it's reporting all this information back that it's for emotional support with little girls, right? From ages 8 and up. Jeffrey Epstein financing Ben Goertzel to do this. Ben Goertzel runs, he's the director of research for the Machine Intelligence Research Institute. And you go, oh, okay, he's the director of research. Well, who's on the advisory board of that? Peter Thiel.
Of course.
Peter Thiel. So the guy that Epstein is financing to make little Sophia robot dolls for children is the head of technology for a foundation whose board member is Peter Thiel. So these guys are all connected in one way or another. I mean, you don't have to go to 6 degrees of separation with these guys. It's 1 degree or maybe 2 at most. But even Thiel is linked up into all of this. So what that guy was talking about, a digital panopticon, he's correct. This is what's happening, and being, the prison is being built around us, while the vast majority of people enthusiastically cheerlead it, I suppose.
Yeah, and the point you made again is that's why the effort by the main coverage is kind of making Epstein kind of the end all be all. Right. He was the one doing it. He's in control. He's responsible, which is not the case. I mean, whether he clearly had a lot of influence and power, but that's the same point, is that so who is driving this, right? Where is this coming to? That's the Thiel aspect. That's the higher level that we don't. That is what the actual deep state is, in my opinion. The shadow government, the unelected power structure that's never moving, never elected, never leaving, that they have influence over all of this. And I think we've long since been under that rule, and so today they're just trying to kind of build out this new variation to get you looking in a different direction as they kind of cement in that control going forward, is what we've been talking about, So it is, I mean, that really just comes up, there's a lot of other topics we could get into, but it really does come down to all of driving in this direction for a lot of different parts. And I do think, though, to end on a slightly positive note, there's a lot of people out there, even involved in other parts of the world, not to say that any government we should be listening to or trusting, but that there are parts in the world that I still think want control over their people, like any government does, but doesn't want that outcome. Sort of like we saw with the split during there are people even in our government that sort of, I don't think, wanted the kind of world that was being built, but they still wanted control over our lives. And so you get those kind of deviations. But I'm saying, there are people that seem to want to stand up and stop this. And I think we need to start leaning into that, start calling this stuff out, and very much take advantage of the moment right now where people are finally starting to ask these questions. And, shows like this will only help. So thanks for being here, brother.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It kind of reminds me of the Solzhenitsyn quote about you should have been shooting these guys when they were coming to get you a long time ago. He's talking about the people creeping down into into the basements. You should have been beating them over the heads. There should have been 8 of you down there with clubs beating those guys, because if you don't, while they're building this digital prison system, they will eventually get it finished, or at least finished to the point where enough people are under the thumb, and it'll be a different world. So I think it's important for us to dig into these topics and recognize them, not necessarily obsess with them to the point where we ruin our own lives, right? Like, understand the magnitude of it, but don't become overwhelmed by it, and talk to people who we can reach. That not everybody's reachable, but the people who you think you can get, ask them some questions. Hey, what do you make of this stuff? What do you make of this digital prison that's being built? What do you make of this or this? And hand a story over to them. Go grab a story off Activist Post and say, hey, there you go. I read this today. What do you make of this? And get your friends to start thinking.
Yes.
Because we're talking about it because we're interested in it. So many people out there aren't talking about it. They might be interested in it, but they don't know to be interested in it because they don't even know it's happening, because it's not the sort of thing that gets, advertised by the mainstream media. Hey, look at what we're doing. We're building a control grid to keep you guys under our thumb forever. And it's almost done. Well, that conversation isn't going to happen until it's too late. But so it's up to us. We do have a responsibility. We play a role in this to have the conversations and talk about it and work it out and move ourselves out of the way of this to the extent that we can. And I always appreciate you having me on to go as deep as we can go.
Absolutely. And look forward to one coming up next month, guys. And I'll end with a point that on the point that came to my mind about what you were saying about kind of doing, leaning in too much or becoming obsessive. It's something that I struggle with all that's going on, and how, this is what I care about, is balance in all things. I have it written on my wall. It's like, you got to take time to get the hell outside and to put your feet on the ground and to find something outside of just obsessing over, which again, there's important moments to, maybe obsess is the wrong word, but, to just take all your time and put it into this. And again, I struggle with this. Like, I am forcing myself to try to break away, but balance in all things. It's one of the most important things in life, in my opinion. So yes, it's important, but make sure that you're not losing yourself to it, because that's what I talk about. People that, but it's almost like a good fault. You care too much, but that I've worked with people over the years that, came out hot, they wanted to change the world. And, 6 months later, I can't do this anymore. And, I get it. It's hard, but that's the idea. So balance in all things, guys. Take that with you today and get outside. So thank you, Charlie. And I'll be seeing you next week or next month, brother.
Thanks for having me.
Everybody out there, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.